South Africa's unemployment rate is on the decline. 373,000 more South Africans are now employed, with the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape and the Northwest leading the charge. Stats SA released the third quarter of job figures yesterday. The sector of community and social services, construction and trade have been the most significant job growth sectors. Let's now get reaction on this latest number with the ATM leader, Vuyo Zungula. Vuyo, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. So there has been a slight increase in our unemployment figures. I just want to hear your quick reaction to this.
We still have a crisis, Aldrin. It is a crisis because we have close to 10 million young people between the ages of 15 and 35 who are basically not doing anything. They are not at work, they are not at school, they are not in training. Again, if you look at the expanded definition, it is still 42%. That is still very high. Therefore, our proposals as the ATM is that there needs to be fundamental changes into the economy because the economy is still concentrated in very few hands. That is why you find that all industries are dominated by very few companies. And you look at also the informal sector, it is dominated by a particular grouping. Therefore, our proposals is to ensure that the economy must be transformed in order to make South Africans to be economically active. Yeah. Firstly, there needs to be a change in terms of government spending. The government spending must tilt towards small businesses. And all tenders and contracts of government that are below 10 million must be set aside for small businesses. And there needs to be an intervention by government to reopen all of the factories so that we produce goods locally, because manufacturing does create jobs. It is unfortunate that in our country, we are a consuming country, we are consuming everything. We import even toothpicks instead of producing goods that would be used to stimulate the economy, create jobs. So that is, amongst others, our proposals.
Yeah. So yesterday, actually, we were running a poll around this just ahead of the release of the data, which has now come out, that our official unemployment rate was at 32.1% in the third quarter of 2024. And here's your reaction to that poll that we were running yesterday. You list a number of interventions that you think are important, 4 of them in total. You've already mentioned 4, you've already mentioned 2, reopen factories and manufacture goods locally. 3, government spending must be at least 50% of SMMEs. So I want to focus on these 2 others. 1, reserve certain sectors of the economy for only South Africans. 2, prioritize South Africans for job opportunities, only employ foreigners for skills we don't have. How do we get it right when it comes to number 1? Reserve certain sectors of the economy for only South Africans. What sort of sectors would these be?
If you were to look at Botswana, how they've managed to turn their economy around, you don't have people coming from other countries running cell phone shops or bakeries. There are some entry-level businesses that they've set aside only for their nationals. This is to ensure that their nationals do not have to compete with other people coming from other countries who may have an unfair advantage. For example, in our country, we've got the entry-level economy, whereby it's dominated by Chinese and other people from Asia who are funded by their governments at times to come and trade in South Africa. Now, if you're going to have a SIPO from Soweto trying to open a cell phone shop, having to compete with someone coming from Pakistan who's funded by their own government, it becomes an unfair advantage. That is why, at a basic level, go to each and every mall in the country, look at the people that are running cell phone shops there. All of them, they are not South African. So it is in that context to say, if we are going to prioritize South Africans and ensure that they are the primary beneficiaries of the economy, there needs to be laws that favor South Africans against unfair advantage that is provided by people funded by their governments. So it is in that context whereby if you can go even in the entire continent and other countries, the entry-level businesses, they are only set aside for the locals to make sure that they don't have to compete with foreign nationals when it comes to participating in the economy.
Yeah, and on top of that also is concerns that have been raised around, for instance, when you say prioritize South Africans for job opportunities, only employ foreigners for skills that we don't have. If you look, for instance, at one of the retailers, I think it's Checkers 60 minutes, is that what it's called? Yeah, Checkers 60-60. The concern that has been raised there is that most of the drivers, the majority of the drivers are foreign nationals. This is not a rare skill. But while it's not a rare skill, the argument that has come from the retailer is that unfortunately, when we do employ South Africans for these jobs and go through the training, the majority of them actually end up leaving the job itself. Concerns have been raised around safety and so forth. But what's your take on this? Because the impression that is given by corporate as well is that there are certain jobs that South Africans want to do and there are certain jobs that South Africans do not want to do, but that hole still needs to be plugged, and it seems that foreign nationals are willing to plug that hole.
It is a big lie that there are jobs that South Africans do not want to do. Recently, I think one of the restaurants in Cape Town, Kwa Ace, they opened opportunities for people to be bartenders and just do cleaning jobs. The streets there were full. There were over 3,000 people lining up wanting to do those jobs. So it is a big lie. It is a big lie because the companies, corporate here, wants to exploit foreigners. They want to exploit migrants. And the best way to do that, it is to get them to work in jobs whereby they are not unionized. In other words, whenever they've got issues, those foreigners that are working there do not have any recourse in terms of unions to defend them and protect their rights. And if you look at, for example, what happened in the George building collapse, where it was found that there were foreigners there, there was a substantial number of foreigners that are working there. They were working in unsafe conditions. That is why corporate loves employing foreigners over South Africans, because they exploit them, they make them to work in unsafe conditions, and then they create a narrative that South Africans do not want jobs. Now, if the Labour Department of Employment and Labour, had functional and effective labour inspectors who would ensure that all companies respect the laws, and all of these managers and companies that violate our immigration labor laws, they are actually charged, and some managers must be arrested because they are the ones who are contributing to the high unemployment levels, because instead of following the labor laws, employing South Africans in line with the labor laws, they prepare to employ foreigners in order to exploit them and underpay them and create this tension whereby there's tension between foreigners and locals, because companies prefer foreigners because they can exploit them, and inadvertently the locals are sidelined. So it becomes important to avert that tension. The Department of Employment and Labour must be efficient in terms of ensuring that all companies, all establishments operating in South Africa must operate when it comes to employment of people in line with the labor laws. That is what would reduce our unemployment levels.
Yeah, but isn't there also a case to be made around there are certain jobs that South Africans are not willing to take on, whatever the conditions are, and how do we deal with those conditions to try and make sure that they are conducive for those South Africans actually to get employment in those sectors?
No. It is a big lie, Aldrin. It is a big lie because, again, corporate wants to undercut wages. They want to pay very low wages. They want to make people to work under unsafe conditions. And therefore, if you're going to have a foreigner coming from another country as desperate, they are even willing to work in very high risk jobs and pay and earn next to nothing because they're desperate. So that is what corporate wants. However, we as a country have gone a long way in terms of our labor relations. Therefore, it becomes important that we don't have corporate trying to reverse the gains that have been made when it comes to the issues of the workers by employing foreigners who they know they can exploit them, they can make them to work in unsafe conditions. Therefore, in our view, here it is a big lie to say that South Africans are picky or they do not want jobs. South Africans do want jobs. If you can make an opening now, just make a poll, or maybe just say there's a job opening whereby you need drivers. South Africans will be there in numbers. Even if you say you want cleaners, you want general workers, they will be there in numbers. So what we must not do as a country is to allow companies to create this tension between foreigners and South Africans, because they are the drivers of illegal immigration, they're the drivers of the high unemployment rates that we see in the country.
Just quickly in conclusion, Vuyo, one of the stories that we're focusing on this morning is what's currently playing out in Stilfontein. A number of illegal mine workers or alleged zamas being underground. There is this Operation Vala Umgodi by the police as well as the South African National Defence Force, where they're closing off the routes where the miners would normally be getting food as well as water from. As ATM, what's your take on this approach that has been employed by the police as well as the SANDF?
We agree 100% with that approach. The government, we've been calling the government to actually deal with the illegal mining. You'll recall that illegal miners have been terrorizing communities for the longest time. People have been raped, people have been killed, simply because illegal miners are not abiding by the law. They're not people who are generally coexisting with other people. Therefore, those illegal miners, they've committed a crime. They must be arrested, they must be charged, and they must be sentenced. There must be no case whereby they are going to be given leniency for breaking the law, because in any case, if that were to happen, it means each and every lawbreaker in the country can say a precedent has been set, they must also be given leniency. Also would want the government to utilize, to give mining licenses to former mine workers, because we find that some mining companies retrench workers, and those retrenched workers, they end up going to illegal mining because they're trying to make a living. So to avert the conversion of former mine workers into illegal miners, if they could be given mining licenses and being supported, that would assist in terms of ensuring that we reduce the numbers of illegal miners that are there in the country.
Thank you so much for your time. Vuyo Zungula is the leader of ATM. What's your take on that question that we're asking you this morning about?